So that's kind of reopened kind of that trauma and that wound because, like I said before, I tried to, let him see him and he didn't really care. We'd go over there and he'd be like, "Oh, I'm tired from working on this car. I'm sorry. Can y'all come back another time?" When really it was drug related. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. But I'm glad I made the decision I did make.
Hello and welcome to Healing Trauma Mamas. I'm your host, Madon Wingo. Thank you for joining us as we share in our stories and experiences of healing from childhood traumas and birth traumas. Listen as we discuss our struggles, our failures, our strengths and our victories, and all those lessons we've learned along the way. Hello, Healing Trauma Mamas. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so thankful you came to join us today. I've just been so thrilled with all these sweet mamas that want to come on and share their stories and really, be vulnerable and share their journeys so that it can help other women, you listeners out there, and help you on your journey. It's so powerful when we share in community what we've been through and how healing has come, and we just encourage one another. And so I know that Mara's story today is going to do that for many of you. And so I'm just so thankful she came on the podcast today. And do you want to introduce yourself there, Mara?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mara. I actually, Madon was one of my student midwife when I have had my little one who's also here. He had to be involved, and I'm just super excited to be here and share my story with y'all.
Awesome. Yeah. So, well, we can start wherever you would like to start, as far back as you would like. I've had people like me sharing on the story where we start from, birth, our own births, and then getting to, the births of our children. And I'm happy to start wherever you would like. You were a very special case that I got to be, I would say case, but a very special client that I got to help with when I was newly a student midwife. And you've been so sweet to me throughout the years and even coming when I was recovering from surgery and coming to see me, and just very special, you and your family. So I would love to let you share with the listeners more about your journey and learn myself more about your journey and how the Lord's brought you to where you are today.
Yes, sorry, having to move. Yeah, so I actually was a home birth myself. My mom actually had me. Um, the midwife actually didn't show up, so one of her friends actually delivered me at home. And so I knew I was actually, for a while I was addicted to drugs, and I actually went to rehab and sober living. And when I was out in California for sober living, is when I found out I was pregnant with my little one. And he's my little miracle one right now because I also have a polycystic ovary syndrome. And so I really didn't think I'd ever be able to have kids. And so when I found out I was pregnant with him, I knew that I also wanted to have a home birth. And so that's how I was lucky enough to meet you through Jaquetta. And I was so glad for that because you helped so much. But it wasn't always easy. Unfortunately, his biological father is an addict still. And when we came back from a doctor's appointment, well, when I came back, but obviously the little one was with me, he was still using in the house and I had to leave. And it was really hard. It was really hard, having to give up what I thought my perfect little family was going to be. And I struggled with that so he's almost 4. So I don't know, since he was almost 2, the past 2 years of just, worrying that he's going to do something to us or, hurt me so he can have the little one. And luckily right now he's in prison, but I know eventually he'll get out. I have a protective order, but that still doesn't make me feel safe. A piece of paper doesn't always protect you from what people really want.
Yeah.
So
Wow, that was a lot really quick. Let's
Yeah.
maybe go back and let's kind of slow down a little bit so we can get to know you a little bit better. So let's start from the beginning a little bit more, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
I would love to start. So, yes, you were a home birth, but you were a home birth that kind of was traumatic because your mom's midwife decided not to come in labor.
Oh. Yes.
So we call that abandonment. That is not okay whatsoever. I have sadly heard of that happening a few times and I don't understand it. But your mom still persevered and she got other women to come help her.
Mhm.
And I'm really thankful for that for her. So you kind of had a little bit of a traumatic beginning. So do you want to share a little bit like what led you down the road to becoming an addict?
Yeah. Um, so I've never picked the best guys except for the one that I'm dating now. He's an amazing person. He's in recovery too. But I've never been the best at picking people to date in my life. I share this when I was able to share my story. It's always kind of the same people, the ones I think I can fix. And
Mm.
I actually met this guy on Tinder and we started dating. And he was an alcoholic and addict, and he kind of hid being an addict for a while until I think he knew maybe I would join him. And so we're doing drugs together, and that transpired from, not so harsh things to harsher things. I don't know if I can share that on here or not.
You can share whatever you want to share.
Okay. Doing cocaine to it ended up being meth and I didn't know. And yeah, doing kind of a list of things, morphines, other pills. And for a long time I didn't know I was doing meth until he told me. And then we moved here to be closer to family and it just kind of got worse. Didn't wake up one day and be like, "Oh, I want to be an addict when I grow up." It kind of happened and struggled with that since I was probably 23 to I was 26. And then the guy I was dating at the time was going to go to rehab. So I thought, I'll just go. I don't know what to do with life in a sense. So that's kind of where that went.
So, how did that rehab go?
It went really well. It was a small facility in South Bend, Indiana, kind of minimum security. So if nobody really knows much about like rehabs and treatment centers, some of them, don't have a fence around them. Some of them, like the one I was at, did. And I just thought that was normal because that was my first rehab center. I wake up every day working the program and hoping that's my last one. And met some interesting people. Got really good help through my counselor. She was amazing, and I still think about her every day. How she helped me and helped me grow into a better person than I was before.
Mm, that's awesome.
So
If you don't mind, I know this is really vulnerable, and I
no
really
problem.
appreciate you sharing, Mara, because I don't know what anybody's going through that's listening to this right now. And those are special people who work in rehab facilities that they really have to love it, and their goal is to help you see yourself in a different way and really to desire to want to help yourself and to have that, you know, desire to understand that I am worth helping,
Mhm.
and I am valued and loved, and doesn't matter if this or this person made me feel like I wasn't, I still am. And I know most of the times from all the studying that I have done on trauma specifically, and then about people who have got into things like this, that there's underlying things, and usually they're lies that you have been believing for a long time, whether it's like you're not valued, you're not worthy, you need to find love somewhere else, especially like in men because your dad didn't give you much love or you never had a good
Mhm.
male role model or maybe you had a really negative female role model, all those types of things. And then
Mhm.
helping you counter those things to replace those lies and to walk truth about who you are and
Mhm.
truly believe that about yourself. And it sounds like that's what she helped you do.
Yeah, and there was another guy. We did small groups besides like individual one-on-one with our counselor. And there was this guy, unfortunately, he's passed. I don't know if he relapsed or what happened, but it was kind of he was going through something similar. And he just started to kind of open up and started sharing. That's kind of when I got I guess the kind of the courage to share more and open up about the things. My parents are luckily they're still married today, and I know a lot of people's parents aren't. And my dad, he was he still is a truck driver. And when I was growing up, he was working nights. He got off like at 3 a.m. in the morning. So it was kind of like our mom was just a single mom. And so looking back, I think a lot of um, probably the validation I was looking for in these men I was choosing wasn't healthy because even though I had my dad crying, um, I didn't quite know that healthy, in a sense, like that healthy role model as much, or I didn't understand because I was so young. And my counselor's name, her name was Shakira. And like I said, she just really helped me see a lot of things that I didn't want to see at the time. And this is also why they tell you in the first year of recovery not to get in a relationship because that's unfortunately where I met my sons. Well, not unfortunately because I have my son out of it, but in other circumstances, I met his biological father. And looking back, I'm like, oh, that's why they kept saying these things because you don't know who you are the first year. And
Yeah.
really, I have 5 years clean now, and still some days I don't know who I am. And so I just have to think back to those times with my counselor and just remember I'm still growing just like everyone else is in the world. And I shouldn't always take things so personally as I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and healing is a process. And
Yes,
you
definitely.
grow and you heal in some areas and you get strengthened in those areas and then that highlights some other areas where you're like, "Oh, yes."
Yes.
Um, yeah. So that definitely, it's a process that we're all growing in. So you met him and you got pregnant. Do you wanna share about your pregnancy at all?
Yeah. So, like I said, when I found out I was pregnant, I was in California and I was probably almost in my second trimester by the time I really started thinking something was going on. I wasn't feeling well. I was just really um probably that first 3 months I was eating other food, but mainly it was chicken noodle soup. And then I took a pregnancy test and found out I was pregnant and went to my first ultrasound alone. He was working nights at the time. And now looking back, I feel like he didn't really care. He couldn't be bothered. He had just gotten off work, but a lot of people get off work and still go to those things with their significant others. And I was actually at that ultrasound 10 weeks and 3 days pregnant. And so I knew I wanted to be closer to family. It was also right when COVID started and got out of California in time because they closed like everything down. It was pretty crazy. And came back here to Texas and I had talked about, if I wanted to use a midwife or my doctor in Austin who actually diagnosed me with PCOS. And I decided I wanted a midwife, and we knew Jaquetta, and that's how we met you. And I was driving 4 hours to Midland once a month, having checks, and then I did my anatomy scan in Austin. So that's 8 hours from where I live, maybe seven if you go the back way. And I knew I didn't want to know the sex of my baby. I wanted it to be a surprise. And his biological dad and his mother insisted that they had to know so they could make blankets. And looking back too, he was very narcissistic and gaslighting and stuff like this. So I played along. I just told the tech I didn't want to know. I had to write it on paper. And it was actually ruined a few times, like at the baby shower and stuff, but they tried to cover it up. And the last probably 4 months, I was very stressed. He was hiding, like I said, his drug use, and I felt like I was going through everything alone. And then we had an Airbnb in Midland,
Yeah, so
and
tell everybody how far you were traveling for your midwife appointments.
yeah, so I was traveling 4 hours each way for my midwife appointments because where I am, we have midwives, but at the time she didn't have a license. She was working under her daughters, and I just didn't feel comfortable like I did with you and Jaquetta. I felt like my needs were going to be heard better, and they definitely were. And towards the end, that last um, what was it? The last month. It's this little one just I also had to have a version with him. He had to be turned manually.
That's a big story about that too, actually. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like you could share just because he was
Yeah.
persistently breech,
Yeah.
and we had talked about, Jaquetta, I don't believe, was comfortable with breech for a first-time mom,
Yeah.
and so your options was to get an ECV, which is an external cephalic version, and you have to go in to see a doctor to be able to do that, and they generally will do it in the surgical room. So and generally, they actually will give you some meds to do it as well, because it can be very painful. And they have
Yeah.
to really watch the placenta, watch the baby's heart rate, watch everything while they're doing it, just to make sure that it is going to be, that everybody's handling it well, because it can be
Yeah.
intense. And
Yes,
so
definitely.
we got that doctor who agreed, a local doctor here, she agreed to do the ECV for you. And we
Yes.
came in and, I don't wanna take away from your story, but I just remember how, one of they didn't understand that you had been an addict. And
Mhm.
so they kept pushing because they were like, "It's gonna be really painful, and you really should get the meds. Why do you keep declining the meds?" And you just kept telling them, "No, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it."
Yeah.
And I remember I finally looked at the anesthesiologist and I was like, "She is an addict, and she has said no, she doesn't want anything in her system." And that's what you said several times. Like, "I don't
Yeah.
want anything in my system. I am not doing it. I can tough it out."
Mhm.
And, we went in that room. It was the first time I got to be in the surgery room for them to do an ECV, and,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, it was intense.
Yeah.
Like, the doctor was sweating, and she was working so hard, and we'd have to pause for you to take a breather, and then try again and continue. And I know that it was very hard, and it was painful, but it was successful, and that was
Yeah.
amazing. But, I'd love if you wanna share a little bit more on your side of that, what that looked like.
Yeah, so I remember the I think she was a resident doctor coming in and asking because they had me hooked up to the fetal heart monitor and everything, and asked me, "Do you feel that?" And I said, "Feel what?" She's like, "You're having contractions right now." I was like, "Oh, am I?" Because with him being breech, I just really wasn't feeling any kind of Braxton Hicks contractions, anything like that. And so I don't remember what they gave me to help slow those down because she said if we don't slow these down, it's going to be harder.
Tributaline.
Puberty, okay. And they gave me the medicine and it slowed it down, and I do remember the anesthesiologist being in there and being very adamant, and that was probably the biggest time in recovery too, but, I felt in my pregnancy that I had to advocate that, "No, I don't want these things," you know, "Quit asking." And they wheeled me, into the OR room, and like I said, that was during COVID, so everyone had to have a mask on, and I still have that mask, actually. And the doctor came in, and she was like, "She doesn't need that. You don't have to strap her down," and, I get the ultrasound out, and, she's doing her thing, and I'm trying to breathe through it because, it was very painful. Uh, Trying to think the best way to explain it is just so much pressure, not necessarily from her hands manually turning him, but just I him having to move and, had to take I know at least one big break, maybe there was another. I was like, "You gotta give me a second to catch my breath as best I can," and, luckily, it was done, and I was able to head to, Midland from Sweetwater, and actually from Sweetwater to Midland, I was able to feel what contractions were like with him now being head down, and that whole time I was just holding the car door, like, breathing because, like I said, that was the first time I'd ever felt contractions my whole pregnancy with him, and it was just a very interesting experience, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Well, and I was thinking people might ask, like, why did they care that you were having contractions? But during an ECV, they need your belly to be as soft as possible. They don't need you
Yeah,
having a contraction while trying to do it. So that's why when we realized you were having contractions, that's why they were like, hey, we need to settle these contractions down so that we can do the ECV. And then
yeah.
I remember the doctor, and she was like, because then the anesthesiologist like, great, then we're having a baby here, and she's like, no, she's going home and having her home birth.
Yeah, and I had a little, like, worry on my face because they kept making it sound like, "Okay, you're gonna have if this doesn't work, a C-section, like, today." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh," like, then I got a call and blah, 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 and so there was that once that doctor said, "No, she's doing this and she's going home," I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yes.
I had a
Yeah,
big sigh of relief.
for sure. Well, and I just think it was just so like, the stuff, that's nothing they'd really experienced before. That wasn't
Mhm.
anything that, they had seen done before, not to do the ECV and then and like, "Oh, yeah, she's having contractions, but go home, have your baby." That's
Yeah,
just not something that they, normally encounter. So it was
right.
quite different. So then you drove all the way from Sweetwater back to Midland, which is about an hour and 45-minute drive or so. Then did labor continue?
No, I think that was just the first time I had really had any pressure, like, on my cervix that wasn't his butt or I guess his butt really. Um, and so it like I said, continued the car ride, and then once we got to the Airbnb, I think if I recall getting out of the car, like, I wasn't feeling anything anymore. And so that was very nice, to be able just to get into the house and relax and everything, since it had been kind of an eventful day.
Yeah. Yeah, very eventful. Yeah,
Yes.
so after the ECV, when did you go into labor?
So I started contractions on the 21st about 6 p.m. And that day before, we were at church, and Jaquetta and you had said, usually if you're having contractions the same time every night or at a certain time, that usually at that time is when labor will start. And so my first kind of mild contractions happened Saturday the 20th. And I was sitting in church, and the priest was giving his homily, and I'm just breathing through it and like, okay, we gotta please like hurry this up, Father. I gotta get home. And they slowed down, and then that Sunday morning I kind of woke up and was just kind of not quite really having contractions, but knew something was going on. And then about 6 p.m. that night, they started kind of more frequently. I remember there had that freak snowstorm in Midland that like
That's
week
right.
before. And I was nervous. I was like, "Mom, what if, like, Jaquetta and Madon can't get here? Like, oh my gosh." And Jaquetta said, if I have to, I'll have, like, Matt drive us." And, I was like, "Okay." But luckily at that time, the snow had, like, melted off the roads and it was passable. And like I said, they kinda were getting stronger through that night. I reached out to his biological dad and said, "Hey, you probably need to come." It took forever, it seemed. Y'all were there monitoring. I asked, you know, I knew I kinda wanted to have a water birth. So, when I would had progressed enough, I remember I was able to get into the birthing pool and kind of labor there, and, then I spent what felt like the whole night in there. Um, and,
You were in there a long time.
yeah. Um, and I was the lucky one that I guess during labor, I'm gonna be the nauseous one and throwing up because I was throwing up and, um, had to get out because, she just needed me in a different position. Kind of tried all the positions and, finally at, 11:27 that morning, little one was born, and, he was a big one. Apparently, I don't recall this, but I had to, like, push him all the way to his ankles, it seemed.
Oh my goodness, yes. Yes. Wow. Yes.
And, he came out. I was just so relieved because obviously being my first, I didn't know how long he'd have to rock under my pelvic bone. And I remember I kept asking, "Is he under? Is he under?" And, finally, like I said, he was born. She put him on my chest, and I didn't know the sex until later when I looked. And he a big boy, for sure. And, I was just so happy to finally for him to be Earthside because him being my first, like I said, I kept asking that question. So I know it was kind of probably redundant to everybody else, but I just felt like he would never come out. And then I couldn't do it. And I just remember the support from you, from Jaquetta, and from my mom, and, everybody crying once he was here, and he was okay. And, my first meal was Chick-fil-A. Mom,
Yep.
and, like I said, he was 9:13, and I was all like, "My gosh," like, none of us thought he had to put that on the last, like, couple weeks before he was born because none of us saw that coming.
Yes.
Ugh.
He was so big. Remind me, I didn't quite hear it cut out. How big he was? Remind me?
He was 9:13,
Okay.
and 21 inches long.
Yeah, he was long.
Yeah. And I was like, "Where were you hiding any of that?"
Yes, because you do not seem to have that much space to have that big of a baby.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, for sure, and he was, we did I think, as a person there with you too, like, we felt the same thing a little bit like, "Okay, there's more and more baby coming, where is the end here?" You know?
Yep.
Like, you were pushing and pushing and pushing, and I guess I lost track of how long you pushed, but it was the longest crown I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
I know what
definitely.
I know when I asked altogether, it was 19 hours, I guess, in labor, and really from what did she say? And I could be saying it wrong, about 9-ish is really when it was getting down to the
Mhm.
nitty-gritty of, "Okay, we gotta, start
Yeah.
getting this going more."
Yes. Yeah, and he needed a little bit of help when he was born, but
Yes.
yeah. and then he did great.
Yep.
Kept up and did really well, and yes, we were all crying.
Yes.
Yep, for sure. Remember that very well. Well, so how with all of that, hard labor that you did excellent, you absolutely rocked it, and with all that you had leading up to it, how do you feel like you did in the postpartum? How did any of that affect you for the postpartum?
I think I did okay. My mom was watching me really closely to see if I'd get the super baby blues or anything. I wasn't, me and his biological dad were still living together up till he was 6 months old. So, really, the only time I had help is when I was over at my family's house. I'm sure he'll try to say, well, I was working long hours, blah, blah, blah. But again, I know there's plenty of people out there that work long hours and help their spouse. So I kind of felt like at home I was doing things on my own. He really didn't want to help with changing of diapers or, bringing me stuff while I was not breast- breastfeeding. Um, so, like I said, I only felt like I had help when my family was around. And so I probably, on like a small degree, I was a little depressed, but not super, super duper like baby blues or anything like that.
Yeah, good. Well, and I know your mom was keeping a close eye on you,
Hmm.
and that was helpful.
Yes.
So, past that, so then obviously, as you mentioned before, there was some struggles there relationship-wise.
Hmm.
Found out he was still using. How have you done with all of that?
Um, so at first it was really hard. I thought I'd have this, in air quotes, perfect little family. And so when I really found out, I tried. I did try to make it work where he could see his son, and then it just got to a point where he was, drugs make you very psychotic and not in your right mind, and just got he got really out of his mind, and I was afraid to leave the house. And we were actually away for, my youngest nephew to be born, and he was showing up at my sister's house. He was vandalizing her car, and, so my dad called the cops on him, and he was put in jail, and I decided, I need to talk to a lawyer, and, took what seemed like ages. Got a protective order. He's trespassed, which never stopped him from, again, slashing my tires. Think that was last 4th of July. Terminated his rights. That was long and hard for me, a long decision, because his family doesn't live here, and I just felt, he didn't make a he could have been here for the first court hearing. He was in Houston, and he didn't, make an effort. There was plenty enough time by the time he got served to get here. And he didn't, that just kinda shows me he didn't really care. The child's just a pawn in his game. And, so I really did struggle with the terminating his rights. But in my mind, if you're not making an effort, his family doesn't really make an effort to even know their nephew or grandkid. It's like, I'm not gonna force that. It's not in my thought, it's not a child's place to be in adults' lives. It's the adult's responsibility. And so I sometimes still make jokes around Thanksgiving, Christmas. Oh, not even a text message of, "Hey, can we get a picture?" Because I know they're not gonna do it. They think I'm, the bad person, and I'm okay to be the bad person in their narrative. I've learned, that's okay. You don't have to always be the good person in everyone's narrative. And, like I said earlier too, he's in prison. He's in prison right now for, but well, I think he was charged with the original harassing and stalking is what he's in there with. But last time I checked, he could be charged with 4 charges because he's tried reaching out through third parties. when he's not supposed to. Um, so that's kind of reopened kind of that trauma and that wound because, like I said before, I tried to, let him see him and he didn't really care. We'd go over there and he'd be like, "Oh, I'm tired from working on this car. I'm sorry. Can y'all come back another time?" When really it was drug related. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. But I'm glad I made the decision I did make with it.
Yeah, good job standing up for yourself.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you've been through quite a lot.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, and like we said earlier, like, each of these experiences, they grow you and they
Mhm.
strengthen you. And as you work in healing one area, then it opens up to be able to heal in another area. So right now, I mean, you feel like you've got some healing in some
Mhm.
areas that you've definitely can see. Yeah, that's great. I love that. And well, I look forward to much more healing coming for you.
Thank you.
Um, and that just you were mentioning advocating for yourself, like in the
Mhm.
pregnancy and throughout and all of that, like that helps you advocate yourself just as a for yourself just as a person as
Mhm.
well. And so like in a bad relationship, being able to advocate for yourself and your son. A lot of times people who have had trauma especially, they're great at advocating for other people, but not for
Yep.
themselves. Um
Yeah.
yeah. So being able to put, yourself to have respect for yourself, to be able to step up and advocate so that you and your son can get a better spot. That's wonderful.
Yes, and, for a while, I wasn't able to do that. There were times I recall 2 times I tried to leave, on different occasions, and everyone always says, "Oh, if they ever did this, I'd leave," and it's so easy to say until you're in that situation. And one time we argued about something, I don't even remember now, and it was about I had been very adamant that I didn't want bottles because I was breastfeeding and my son was tongue tied and lip tied. So he's already having that issue. And I didn't want for him that confusion of switching back and forth. And his family had gotten bottles. And the argument was about that. And he smashed the bottles and he grabbed my frozen breast milk out of the freezer and threw it outside. And so I run out there and grab it. And by this time, because he's yelling outside, neighbors are coming out. And I ask one of them, "Can you hold him so I can go get stuff?" And he tries to grab the baby from this person. She has kids, and she's like, "No, I'm not giving you this baby. You are way too angry, and you're not in your right mind. No." And I left, and I stayed at my sister's. And a couple days later, I go back because the "I'm sorry, blah blah blah. It'll never happen again" stuff. And again, it happens another time, and he wouldn't let me out the front door. He, like, stands in front of the front door, and he's 6'1", 6'2", and I'm 5'3" and holding a baby, and I'm like, "Just please move, please move." And I think it was that time maybe another time, he smashed this was another time, he smashed, photographs. He broke our new TV, well, my TV, and I think that's still trauma that my little one has. He was asleep in the other room, but for probably the first year and a half, he was afraid of men. He was like, if people like screamed at sporting events, he'd like cover his ears and start crying. He's just recently gotten more used to his uncle. He was afraid of my dad, and we never really think sometimes the things that we go through can affect our kids, and that's something I still struggle with today and I'm working on because I feel so bad as a mom that even though he was in the other room, he he heard those things and, you know, consciously or subconsciously was put in his brain. So that's kind of, what I advocate for too, is, just because they sweet talk it, you know, don't go back because there's so many cases where people go back and it ends so worse. It ends worse than before, you know?
Well, the good thing is that
Mm.
you know how that can affect you later, and so then you know
Yeah.
how you can counter it now.
Yes. Oh, but I'm definitely, like I said, those have strengthened me in other ways. I'm now in a relationship where the person actually values me as a person, and my son loves and is so excited when he comes over and plays with him and things like that that I never, kind of imagined could happen.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, in that, he's gonna see that, when you make somebody feel valued and
Mhm.
and loved, it helps them to blossom,
Yeah.
and that'll bring so much healing, and he'll see that, and that's gonna
Mhm.
really help counter. Even though it's very easy for you, I know, you to have the guilt about those situations, but anytime that comes up, remind yourself of the advocacy that you have done, and you got yourselves out of that situation, and you're working
Right.
hard to repair that, and it can be healed, and it can be taken care of, and he can have amazing examples of people who love and value him and don't
Yes.
scream and yell all the time and fight and all those things.
Mhm.
He's gonna get to see that. And
Yep.
so, while we know that the body does hold things in from, when we're younger, we also know that that can be released and you can have complete healing. So,
Mhm.
that's possible, and you can do that.
Yes.
And so you're on your journey to getting there, and I'm so excited to see that for you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Is there any words of advice, anything that you would like to say to any of the listeners, through sharing your story?
If you're just struggling with anything, like, I don't know, who all listens, but like, if you're struggling with addiction, or, you're struggling with making just a right decision for you, or you think it's, gonna be wrong in the long run, you know, think about that, but don't take it lightly when you make the decision, and don't feel bad for making the decision to better yourself or your child's life, because like you said, in the long run, they're gonna look back, and uh, they're gonna thank you. They're not gonna hold resentments towards you. His biological dad had told me he's gonna resent you when he gets older because he doesn't have me in his life. And for a while I thought that, but I know now he's not going to. When he's old enough and I can explain things, he'll understand, and he will be thankful in the long run. So don't ever feel bad for a decision you make for yourself or to better you or your child's life.
Yeah, amen, that's right. Yeah, thank you so much, Mara. Really
You're
appreciate you coming on the podcast and being vulnerable and sharing. It takes a really strong woman to do that. So I just
you're
really
welcome. Thank you
good
for
job.
having me.
Of course, absolutely. Thank you for listening. May you be encouraged and strengthened by what you've heard today. Remember, you are dearly loved by your Creator, so be who He created you to be. May you go in peace, friends. Till next time, Shalom.